Hey everybody, Tired Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully everyone's doing well and having a good weekend here. So we've been talking about the threat of severe weather for the last couple of days here, and those days are almost upon us. Sunday, of course, in case anyone has missed it, has been downgraded from the day 4 slight risk that we originally seen down to a marginal risk, and we still have the 20th on Monday being maintained as a slight risk. I do think there could be a small chance of this potentially being upgraded. This could also be a little bit more of a later evening, maybe even nocturnal event here. So we're going to just go ahead and look at both of these real quick. Sure, smashing that like button, decimating that subscribe button, and obliterating that share button, because this could get pretty active here. This still could be a little bit of a sleeper here, but things have kind of trended away from being a more significant event here. I think coverage is going to be isolated, hence why they also have downtrended on the size of the marginal risk now, mainly towards Oklahoma City, Norman, Tulsa. These areas need to be looked out for the potential severe weather, mostly in the way of hail at this point. That large-scale ascent is going to be sufficient enough for hail, but the lack thereof is going to kind of inhibit the wind and tornado threat. Plus, the setup itself just kind of has a lot of things out of place here, and timing is always everything on severe weather, something we always say on the channel here. The timing is a little bit better when we head to the following day, which would be Monday, which entails a slight risk that stretches all the way from Mississippi all the way towards eastern Texas and Louisiana in particular. It's right in the center of this area, and maybe a little bit off to the east here, where I'm kind of interested in seeing what happens with this region. I'm thinking right along the state line between Louisiana and Mississippi here, we could have some increased activity as of right now. I'll kind of get into the details of that as we start to look at the models here. I'm going to go dual screen with these and kind of go from that point. But all hazards are possible, but particularly damaging winds and tornadoes with this one. Not a lot of tornadoes as of right now, but a few tornadoes are possible. And I couldn't rule out a strong tornado considering the type of environment that we have. More on that in just a second here. We're going to go and get into split screen real quick. So we're looking at both GFS and Euro at this point. We're going to set both of them into the loop. Euro is to the left and GFS to the right, and for the most part, even though there's a slight delay between the two, you can see the congruency between the models here. You can see the troughing beginning to take shape here in both the short term and the long term, and as we go further about, especially with the GFS to the right, we see an indefinite increase in the amount of troughing that we have going on, as well as the wave amplitude. Now keep in mind, this is looking higher up into the atmosphere, but usually what ends up transpiring in the higher atmosphere, we often will end up seeing that also being the case more so towards the lower atmosphere. And this and what I'm noticing also, especially as we go further along, once we get further into range, further out in the range here, especially at the 200-hour mark, is that there's a lot of divergence that's occurring over here to the east here. So definitely going to be a big swing coming at some point, and it could be what starts out the month of December too. So definitely a lot to pay attention to in the days ahead. We've been kind of talking about a big pattern flip coming, especially with us transitioning into a stronger El Nino, a little bit stronger than what we're used to seeing. And there's even a small chance of this being a historically strong El Nino, and more details of that in another video. But simply put, this will definitely have a big influence on the weather pattern that we're likely to see as we transition from fall into winter a little bit further here. But I'm going to go in depth a little further with this one. I'm going to stop this one real quick so we can talk a little bit more about what we see with the Euro first. From what we see here, especially as we go from this little middle point onward here, looks like we start to shift back towards a maybe a little bit more towards a negative PNA to start out the month of December possibly, and to end the month of November. But as time goes on here, like I said, notice this really strong area of divergence here. I don't necessarily think that there will be any severe weather towards this region, but that might be something to keep an eye on. This will influence the weather in some way, shape, or form. Could bring winter weather into the equation. It's just too far out to really tell at this point. Also see a little bit of ridging going back on towards the south here. So it'll be interesting to see how this ends up playing out here. Could this be as a result of a coastal storm? There's so many different questions, and we can answer some of that tonight, but there's still not going to be much in the way of guarantees here, because we're only looking about 10 days. We're already looking 10 days out at this point. So we'll stop this and we'll do the inverse now. We'll look at the GFS. Pretty much a similar deal across the board here. A lot of congruency between the two on the upper levels, which is definitely reassuring for forecasting here. And as we continue to go further and further along here, notice the amount of troughs that we end up seeing and the little areas where we have those little isobars creating a complete circle. That's an indicator of low pressure. So with that being said, it definitely is looking more and more like, as we continue to transition into a stronger El Nino, this will also help increase the activity. And I think this will also implement the thought that we typically the thought of a more active storm track to the south here. Very common for an El Nino type setup. In fact, I almost would go as far as to say it's a calling card. But this could also influence winter weather, severe weather across the eastern half of the country in particular. North tends to be warmer than average, but this may not influence it as heavily as far as influence winter weather as heavily. You still could see an active season here nonetheless. There have been plenty of years in the past that kind of that I could reference, but again, that's for another video. That being said, we'll go ahead and switch over to the 500 millibar region. We're switching back over to pivotal weather here. And we'll start with this one first. We'll look to the left, and then we'll switch over to the right here. But this is what we're currently dealing with right now, if I can get this to go. But here's the look at Sunday setup. That troughing is starting to really take shape here. One thing that's helping limit the severe weather also is, like I said, this little area right here, the contour line. This is where that low pressure is going to be. It's a little further to the north than what was previously forecasted on this as well, and this is also going to help kind of inhibit some of that severe weather because of lack of forcing as well. So very limited area of severe weather. But as the front starts to build along with this, as we get into the following day, which will be Monday, we can see a little bit stronger forcing here. That low actually also does push to the south as well, which kind of helps aid the potential for severe weather. And like I said, right around that state line could be a little triple point, not triple point, but this little tri-state point right here between Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana could come into play here as well. As we continue to go forward here, we see this front move. The low kind of weakens a bit, so this will limit the severe threat for Tuesday. Not really too concerned about that as much, but heavy rain could still be possible. We continue to watch that move on, and then out that system goes. Another low pressure begins to develop right around Thanksgiving Day and into Friday. This will help influence even more weather to come in. Threat of severe probably won't be as high right now, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. Then look at this big trough that we have beginning to develop here. And interestingly enough, towards the following weekend, I don't expect much in the way of severe weather, but this area, it interests me a little bit right here. It's 186 hours out, so it's not a lot that I can, not a lot of merit I can put into it. But nonetheless, I wouldn't be surprised if we could get something to pop up out of that. So here's a really strong low pressure system. And my concern, excuse me, is that we could end up seeing a winter storm out of this as well. Maybe even a nor'easter. Not a coastal storm, but it looks like we could see some pretty strong winds with this as well too. Hard to say exactly what will come of this, but this is definitely a look that I have seen before in previous years. Even before I started doing the channel, I kind of recognized this look a little bit, but the moisture is going to be the key to everything, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit further as we go on. Of course, this is 216 hours out, so not a lot of merit I can put into that right now, but you can continue to see the increased activity of the pattern here based off the amplitude of the jet stream here, and the fact that we continue to see these little circular areas here on the contour lines, of course indicating low pressure. Here's another one right here. We also have to look at these storms potentially phasing together as well. I consider it unlikely. I think this storm will end up being out ahead, but if any time during the course of the winter we get this kind of situation where storms can phase, this could become a big deal as well. Another video for that will be coming on the Weather 101 list in the future. So switch over to the GFS and we'll kind of go a little further. Also kind of speed things along a bit since this is a little bit longer of a run. You still see that similar look, a lot of congruency between the models here. Like I said, it's very reassuring as far as severe setup's concerned. Like I said, I think that GFS may be showing a little bit more of an a little bit more favoritism for severe, a little bit further to the north here, but still along that general corridor that I was talking about there. And then as we continue to go on, we see a pretty similar deal. This does kind of lend itself to maybe an increased threat for the following day, but not quite as much. It does kind of lag back a little bit, so a little bit of uncertainty there. And then this little system right here does look like it progresses a little bit quicker as well. But nonetheless, though, I'm a little bit more concerned about winter weather, especially towards the Adrian-Dax in particular. But beyond that point, it does look like we start to calm down a little bit. Still see a little bit of potential for severe here, but not quite as prevalent as what the Euro was showing. So, like I said, you see some congruency between the models. You also see a little bit of discrepancy. It's part of the game. But as we continue to go on here, as we go towards the end of the month, I do see potential for a new setup to potentially go on across the southeast here. Not a lot of confidence in it, but nonetheless something to be watchful of. And then as we continue to go forward here, we're seeing that storm track become a little bit more active. This looks kind of interesting, of course, given the fact we're 366 hours out on this look. Not a lot of confidence or merit to put into this, but if that look holds, that could lead to additional severe weather across a very familiar area. We were just talking about this setup for Sunday. This one looks a little better. And when I look back around the time frame for when this setup was at 366 hours out, it looks rather similar. So we could see the same thing. We could see a better look. It's kind of hard to tell at this point. We look at things at 700 millibars, which is a little bit lower into the atmosphere. We see a pretty similar picture. We're going to put both of these into a loop here and just kind of roll from that point. We're going to try to set these up to where they're moving at a similar speed here too. GFS is on the right here, of course Euro to the left. Pretty typical for the channel here. And you could see for the most part, the main eye catchers, of course, are on the 20th, Monday, of course, where you start to see those yellows coming into play. I'm going to scroll down here so you can see the little index key here. When you start seeing those yellows and getting into the golden colors, we're getting about 70, 80 knots, which is pretty strong for this level in the atmosphere here. So there's something definitely keep an eye on with this setup here, considering we have a lot of wind shear available as well. But usually with the strong wind shear over land, these storm systems are usually going to be pretty strong once you start getting to that point. So definitely something I need to be watching on this channel. I'm pretty sure a lot of others will be watching this as well with great interest. You can see the same thing pretty much occurring on the GFS pretty much throughout the entire run. So just further indicators that the weather pattern is going to pick up, folks. So let's make sure that we're keeping an extra close eye on the weather. Make sure you're checking in on this channel more often. So we've done our looks at 500 and even 700 millibars at this point. The last thing to really look at this point will be the low level jet here. And really we're just going to pay attention to Monday. We're going to kind of ignore everything else because the low level jet is the area that's most prone to changing typically. So we'll load GFS real quick and take a look at the Euro first. So for right now, here's us going into Monday morning and then Monday afternoon. And like I said, the low level jet tends to kick in a little bit later in the day. I think we do get enough sufficient daytime heating towards this region here to where we could see severe weather that could last into the evening. And what concerns me most about this is the fact that we're seeing these little pockets of 40 to 50 knots in a good chunk of that area that I'm most concerned about. Like I said, this corridor right around here, maybe I was a little further off to the south here when I originally started talking about it. But this region here definitely interests me the most right now. Do I see a little area right here too? Of course, it could also be extended out a little bit more to the northeast as well. Maybe even Tennessee could be included. But I'm definitely thinking somewhere as far out as maybe east central Louisiana, all the way, not east central Louisiana, but Mississippi, all the way to maybe the Mississippi Alabama line could even be in the action here. So definitely, like I said, a lot of a lot of attention has to be paid towards this area because we're in a prime spot right on the southeastern flank of that low pressure. Usually ends up being a point of interest for most weather, especially severe weather during this time of year. So go ahead and compare that to the GFS here. We're going to keep that there. But if we were to move this forward up to about the same time frame here, maybe a little bit later, because that is the 12Z run that we're looking at there. Here's 21Z. And like I said, a lot of congruence here, a lot of model agreement is indicated right here as well. You can kind of, and you can see that low level jet kind of deepen as we go from 21Z to 00Z here. Even stronger look from the GFS here, which is kind of concerning. When we go over this tomorrow, we'll have a look at the convective models. We'll kind of go from that point as well. But definitely a very concerning look for tomorrow. Or Monday, I should say. All hazards definitely seem like they could be in play. So now, another big topic of the weather ahead, of course, is going to be the temperatures. We'll set the Euro into motion here along with the GFS. So we'll go ahead and kind of put these in a pretty concurrent loop, or as close of a concurrent loop as I can. A little off there, but you can see for the most part, both of these regions, both of these models are looking at the US, and we're seeing that cold air really start to kick in here. And I think that's going to help increase the threat of severe weather, especially as we start to get that much deeper cold air starting to kick in here. Because look what happens towards the end of the month, especially towards the Rockies. You start seeing some below zero temperatures coming into play towards the mountaintops. And eventually that cold air is going to continue to try and work its way east. We start to see more of those 20s, 30s, and even some teens sneaking in now on the Euro and the GFS at this point. We still see that potential for troughing, for ridging to happen over towards the east. Southeast ridge is going to try its best to keep itself in play here. But I think eventually that cold air is going to win that battle this time around. And we're going to start to see those really cool temperatures start to become more prevalent even in the south at this point. Both models are kind of showing it, especially as we get into December here. I'm seeing some days here where we could potentially be struggling to get to 60. So, like I said, it's going to be a little bit more of a flip-flop pattern, but that colder air looks like it's going to eventually start to really take over here. For just how long is going to be the golden question at this point. So the next thing to do, of course, look at our moisture returns for what's ahead here. And what I'm gonna try to do the same thing, but just maybe a little bit better this time around here. So we'll try to set up the speeds to where they're pretty alike here, and maybe not too fast. So here we go. So here we go. This is what we're looking at right now for Monday. I'm trying to keep the time frame in the window here. We're going a little bit slower, of course, with the GFS to try to keep some sort of concurrency here. I know it's a lot to look at, but here's that moisture nose from Monday through Wednesday, and then a new one pops up a little further to the south here by the 7 to 10 day range. And then from that point, we're looking to the GFS, and we're going beyond that point. Like I said, the moisture nose isn't quite as prevalent, which I find interesting because GFS tends to typically have a little bit more an aggressive look on the moisture here as far as the further time frames are concerned. Keep in mind, of course, this is prone to changing pretty often, especially the further out that we look. So this will be up. I'll keep an eye on it on a run-to-run basis here. There's a lot that kind of goes on behind the scenes here. Maybe by the end of the year, we might have a little something that'll show you exactly what goes on here behind the scenes, only if you're interested. That being said, we'll go ahead and move on to the next couple parameters that we like to look at on here. So we'll go ahead and look at the instability here. So this is us looking at our mixed layer cape. We're going to kind of keep this one separate because we're looking at different levels of the atmosphere. The mixed layer kind of looks at all levels of the atmosphere in regards to instability, where the surface cape, of course, looks at the surface. I kind of prefer looking at mixed layer, but I want to kind of give us a broad look at what could lie ahead here. We'll get into the deeper. We'll take a deeper dive into things tomorrow for Monday's setup, since we'll be in range of the convective models. Whoops. But here's a look at the mixed layer, and this is kind of why I'm not really as impressed with tomorrow's setup. Instability kind of kicks in a little bit late, but we see a couple areas where we're getting up to about maybe 600, 700 joules per kilogram. We'll actually go ahead and take a look at the sounding on this as well. But see, that's what I'm saying. The timing of this is just completely off here. Mixed layer is not very impressive. Surface is even less impressive. Plenty of convective inhibition, and then the temperatures are really low. Not much of a moisture return, so kind of a lot working against this setup here. I think the best chance is going to be more so earlier in the day for Sunday, as far as severe is concerned. We get towards Monday, we do get a better look. Here you go, seeing a real difference already. It's pretty keen here, where we see that mixed layer already reaching up to about 1,000 joules per kilogram. Pretty big difference there. And with this, we see a potential for a linear tornado threat here, a linear look, maybe a marginal tornado possible here. Much better moisture return, and then but there is one thing with this. It's a little bit of elevation here with this setup here. You kind of want this to be a little bit more rooted with the surface to kind of help aid in development for tornadoes, but the mixed layer and the surface cape are a lot more ideal in comparison to what we're seeing here. I do think that with the amount of wind shear that we have, we can easily overcome the lower cape values here, which is typical of this time of year, of course. Other parameters, of course, coming into play here definitely kind of aids in the potential for tornado development. I don't expect an outbreak, but nonetheless, could be a few big storms, some of which could cause some problems for some of us over here towards Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas here. And then as we go from that point and beyond here, we kind of see that drop off in cape. Really, for right now, that's the most notable setup that we have going on here in the short term. We do always have to watch Florida. Florida's been its own little beast this year, almost like its own little severe weather alley in its own right. I'm sure some of you that view the channel here can attest to that. But if we were to go ahead and take a look at the surface cape, it's going to be, for the most part, a pretty similar picture being painted here. We have not much in the way of cape throughout the day Sunday, so no surprises there. A little bit better look on Monday, but for the most part, a pretty similar song and dance here from that point on. We see a little bit higher surface cape values here, struggling to get to 1,000, but like I said, I think the wind shear is going to help overcome a lot of that. Excuse me. But as we go towards Tuesday, we do actually, interestingly enough, have just a little bit of cape available, and that could maybe a lot for a isolated severe storm. Can't rule it out. I mean, it is going to be on that cold front, so some damaging wind gusts aren't out of the question, but the probability of it isn't going to be quite that high. So we look further beyond here, we do see indicators of a little bit of instability, mainly staying off the coast though. Water spouts might be a thing over towards the Gulf, but beyond that point though, it looks like we're not going to see too much of anything for a little bit right now. Of course, like I said, looking this far out, looking at stuff like cape is kind of a pain at this point, so it's tricky. Nonetheless though, a lot of interesting stuff that we're seeing here on the models as far as short-term severe weather. Longer term, still some questions, but definitely some things that I've taken note of here for sure. We look at the lightning flash indicator or lightning flash density indicator on the Euro. The short range, of course, we already know what to expect here. In the longer range, looks a little quiet until we get over towards Florida. Towards the following week, maybe we could see some activity about between the 186 to 200 hour range, and then after that point it becomes a little bit less certain. But the Gulf does look like it's pretty active. Not worried about tropical development necessarily, but it's could a lot for potential storms over towards Florida too. And then we'll go ahead and last look at the overall model run here. So we'll go ahead and take a quick look at the Euro and then the GFS to wrap this one up. So here's that first storm system. Then we see a couple of wintry systems starting to come into the mix here. And then with that troughing that we're seeing towards the end of that 10-day period, look how far that snow tries to reach, maybe even towards Texas. That's a bold run, but it's not unheard of. We saw a little bit of this last year. It really depends on how far that cold air makes it. It seems like we get a decent moisture return right at the end of that 10-day period too. So like I said, can't rule it out. Can't rule it out. But this is not the time to go to your store and clean it out of bread and milk and whatever else you need yet. There's a lot of things that can change with this forecast here. So do not, and I say again, do not go to the store and clean out everything that you see on the shelves. You're just going to be wasting money if this ends up going the other way, which it very well could. In fact, I think it's quite likely right now. If we see this a couple of days later from now, my confidence will go up just slightly and continue to go up from that point. But for right now, don't act on what you see at the end of this model run here. And the same thing will go for the GFS. Because, I mean, it's just really difficult to kind of hone in on things the further out you go. And, I mean, for the most part, you do see a little bit of model agreement, but look at the difference right here. Look at the difference. You can already see that storm track a little bit further to the north here. So anyone that saw what we saw here in the Euro and on Central Texas in particular, don't be so quick to jump ship and say, hey, it's gonna snow. You're more than likely gonna get burnt. I'm just gonna tell you now. So that being said, do see the potential for more wintry weather systems on the way. So just make sure we're keeping an eye out, especially towards the Midwest, just east of the Rockies in particular. Kansas could come into play, Nebraska could come into play, maybe even Oklahoma. But right now, though, it doesn't look like there's anything that screams out to me being concrete about any of these storm systems after about 160 hours out. And even then, that's still a stretch at 160 hours out. Really, I would say anything that's within 72 hours, that's when you would kind of want to latch onto it. And even then, you still have to be watchful of that. You don't get a lot of the details until more or less the last minute. That just kind of shows how far we still have to go as far as weather forecasting is concerned. But enough talking at you guys. Appreciate anyone that stuck around for this video, knowing how long, because I know this one's going to be kind of long. But I appreciate you guys all being here, whether it's 13 of you, 100 of you, however, I appreciate it. But definitely try to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button so we can get out to more people and play a part in helping people's day out in regards to the forecast in general. But that being said, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys tomorrow. That'll be a fact. And we'll go from there with the severe weather setup. But until then, it's been Metalhead Weatherman. Hope you guys have an awesome night. Peace out. Horns up.